Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Shakisso Wash Process Ethiopia from Friedhats. And there's the bottle right there. And Friedhats based out of Amsterdam, Netherlands, and they're a coffee roaster that has featured on the channel a couple of times before, but it's been probably about a year or so, and they're a coffee roaster we've heard so many positive things from people that we highly respect in the coffee world, so they were a coffee roaster we knew at some point we were going to go back and revisit. This right here is going to be essentially a week of lighter profiled washed Ethiopian coffees. So if you're a big fan of lighter profiled washed Ethiopian coffees like we are, then this should be a pretty fun week for you, as it was definitely a pretty fun week for us to review all three of these coffees. This right here is day 26 of this coffee. And recipe we settled on for this coffee after playing around with it quite a bit was a 16:1 water to coffee ratio at 205 degrees Fahrenheit, brewed through the Chemex. They are a light European for the roast profile, and let's start discussing this coffee. Day 13, which was our first impression, and it was a pretty tame first impression. It reminded us of a slightly more lively version of Kopi's coffees, delicate florals, and a slight bit of fleshy fruits. We didn't take too much out of this first day, but it was just essentially a pretty delicate and tame first impression. Day 14 went back and we were getting slightly more out of this cup of coffee, a pretty distinct vanilla note, and a slight bit more liveliness in this cup. And we knew at this point we were going to be playing around with this recipe a lot to kind of figure out exactly where we liked this coffee the best. Day 16, there was much more sweetness in this cup, and it was a darker sweetness, which we might describe as either a caramel or a dark honey sweetness. A bit more in this cup, including some delicate florals and a zesty citrus, as well as this vanilla. So a little bit more well-rounded of a cup of coffee. Day 18, which was the standout day of this cup of coffee, and probably still our favorite day of this coffee to this point. And we lowered the temperatures, and there was a lot more in this cup. Sweeter too, dark candy sweetness was present once again, and there was quite a bit of this pleasant apricot candy and citrus finish in this cup. Day 19, we were still seeing some slight improvements. I liked the coffee at the lower temperatures a little bit more and slightly up toast. The stone fruit, slight but more lively in this cup still than it had been on other days. And then day 22, essentially our final note for this coffee, the coffee changes a lot throughout the course of drinking it. It initially starts out as this pretty distinct floral honey before cooling off into a slight bit of stone fruit with a pretty strong but delicate citrus finish, mostly what we would describe as lemon, and there's a fair bit of strong brown candy throughout the cup as well. And it was this lasting finish that was pretty notable as we're drinking this cup of coffee today. You can definitely kind of taste the lasting finish in this cup. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And we have a lot of level 4s on this tasting wheel, so let's go through them real quick. So cleanliness, level 4, that's not really surprising. Washed Ethiopia, so it should be on the higher end of that spectrum. Finish at a level 4, probably about a 4.5. Could have bumped this up to a 5, but we always reserve those lasting finishes for something like those Edwin Narenya coffees that just last eternally. This one has a pretty strong lasting finish though. Sweetness level 3. It could be pushed up to level 4. It's about a 3.5 probably, but it feels just a little bit more like a 3 for us. And then of course the florals we had mentioned throughout. The florals are pretty strong in this cup of coffee. They're pretty delicate and pretty enjoyable, so level 4 definitely justified. Citrus fruit for us was a little bit more pronounced. The lemon was a little bit more pronounced than the apricot we were getting from the stone fruit, so that's why the citrus fruit is higher than the stone fruit, which remains at a level 3. And then the caramel, we mentioned that there's quite a bit of this kind of darker sweetness to this cup of coffee, and that was the theme we were experiencing with the other Friedhats coffee that we had reviewed, was this kind of darker sweetness, which we most closely align with a darker honey rather than a caramel, but we always like to kind of lump the caramel and the honey in together in this tasting wheel, so definitely feel like that justifies level 4, and the caramel was definitely in this cup as well, so level 4 for that. Anything else necessarily worth noting? A body lower? Not really. This looks pretty accurate from what we were experiencing in the bitterness at a level 2 because of the lemon, so that's what we got for the bitterness. All right, our overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. So this one was probably our favorite Friedhats coffee that we've had to this point. We were kind of lukewarm on the other one, but this one right here is pretty nice. It reminds us of a slightly more our profiled version of a Kopi coffee. Wasn't necessarily anything that blew us away, but it was something that does demonstrate the beauty that Friedhats can produce from a lot of their coffees as well. Type of person we would suggest this coffee to is somebody, given our experience with these Friedhats coffees, we have to say is somebody that does like that kind of darker honey taste to it, because that's the finish that we're getting. It's the one that's lasting quite a bit, and slightly more delicate cups of coffee. As this one right here, it doesn't have any of those flavors that are going to necessarily blow you away. Even this pretty pronounced honey that is kind of sitting on the palate throughout the course of drinking it is something that is a little bit more toned back than something we were experiencing from, let's say, the calendar coffee that we had earlier this year. But other than that, yeah, I thought this was a pretty nice coffee, and I think for the most part, we don't necessarily have too much more to say on this coffee, so we will leave this at that. If you have by chance had an opportunity to try this Shakisso or any of Friedhats coffees, we'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it or them as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Shakisso Wash Process Ethiopia from Friedhats. Thank you for watching.